Hello everyone. In our previous video for Angular 2, we looked at very briefly a component and we basically put a bit of styling and a bit of markup and a few little bits and pieces just to make the pages look a little bit more presentable. And then we added a link to chop and change between the two. And we put some highlights in and a few other little bits and pieces, right? Just so we could see where the CSS goes, where the markup goes, so on and so forth. So in this video, what I want to do is I want to basically go through what a component is and create a separate component completely from what we already have. So the idea that I'm going to have is that when I choose a row here in this players list, what I want it to do is show like a little detail screen down here of the player, and basically it'll just redisplay the information up here, back down here in like a, I don't know, like a card like format. Like Bootstrap has this card idea, and I'm going to use that and display it down here. But before we get started, I actually noticed a couple of issues when I was looking at the console for this particular application. And so when I open up the console, if you look at the top here, we've got uncaught error, Bootstrap JavaScript requires Jquery. Now I didn't notice this the first time I put in Bootstrap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go and fix this first. And it happens to be that you actually require two files in order to fix this problem. So the first one obviously is Jquery. And what I'm going to use is I'm just going to grab the CDN from jquery.com/download. And about, I don't know, halfway down the page, there's a link here for code.jquery.com, and this is essentially my CDN. So I'm going to copy that, and I go back to my index.html, and before the Bootstrap script that I have here, I'm going to insert a new script tag, and I'm going to add the source to that particular jQuery, that jQuery location, and then in the script, save it, let it recompile. Right, so everything still works, nothing majorly broken here. However, again, I'll open up the tab, and now I've got Bootstrap tooltips required, this thing called tether, which is at http://tether.io. Now, you go to their website, they're going to ask you to download the file. For development purposes, I don't care to download files. I'm not thinking about performance at this stage. So I found a CDN for it. It's at cdnjs.com/library/tether. And then actually it's the very bottom file. I'm just going to copy this. And again, I'm going to create another script tag underneath the jQuery one. And we're going to put the source in. Whoops. To the location. Close the script tag. Save. Let it recompile. And now, as you can see, all the errors have gone away. So there's no more console errors here in the console. So we should be good to go if we ever use anything bootstrappy that requires jQuery. Fortunately, up to this point we hadn't, so that's why I didn't notice the error. But when I went through the console just to check to see if we had any issues, I noticed that we had that as an error. So I'm going to close these two tabs down now. So now I'm going to get into business, and I'm going to go to the players page, and I'm going to basically start by creating a new component right now, and we're going to put it under the players section. So closing this, I'm going to stop the ngserve or the Angular CLI by Control C, and now I'm going to check to make sure I'm in the right spot, which at the moment I'm not in the app folder, so I'm going to put myself in the app folder, and then ls. And I want to create a player profile component in the players folder. So I'm going to go ng component, and I'm going to go players folder, and I'm going to call it players profile. dash profile, and we'll go enter or return, depending on which keyboard you're using. I'm going to take a few seconds. And there we go, it's created 4 files for us. So going back to the source code, we can see over here now, we have under players, we have a new players profile folder, and it has the 4 files which was just created. And on top of that, if you look in the players module, you'll see that the players profile component has already been registered as a declaration for the players module. So very cleverly, Angular CLI does that for you, so that you don't have to worry about it. But just wanted to double check that that was actually there. So now we'll come into players profile, and I just realised something. Sorry about that, everyone. I just had to step out for a moment. Just something personal. So where were we? We were basically looking at the new players profile component that I created. So I'm going to click on players-profile.component.ts, and I want to quickly just give you an idea of what a component is. So in Angular 2, what a component actually is it's actually a class or file, or basically it's a file that handles the logic for the UI in your application, as well as it can also contain the actual markup itself. Now, generally, as I've recommended in the last video, we keep the markup in a separate file, a separate HTML file, but a component is able to hold on to that template itself within its own metadata. So, as I said up here before in the previous lesson, we have a selector for each component. So this is basically the identity of the component in the application. So if I ever want to reference anywhere in my application a specific type of player's profile component, all I need to do is create a markup tag with the name app-players-profile. And as long as I do that, it will come up on the screen, right? So as long as I fulfill all other requirements such as properties and stuff. At this point, we don't have any properties. We actually aren't doing anything inside of our class. It is set up so that if we wanted to set something up in our class, we can. The other thing about a component is, yes, you have a template URL, points to a HTML file, and each component also has the ability to have its own CSS file, which is separate from the master. Now, I'm not going to talk about the CSS and how that's rendered and how that's resolved until another lesson, because there's actually a number of different ways it can be handled. By default, it's handled using attributes on the actual DOM, or the DOM element that actually refers to this component. But for the most part, it's nothing you really need to worry about too much. But I will talk about it in a future video. Now, for a component to be actually classified as a component, it has to have a component decorator on it. So this app component is the decorator, saying this is in fact a component, and then we pass it in an object, and as you said, you've got these 3 properties. Now there's a few more properties to a component. I'll probably mention those in another video as well, because in this particular one I want to talk more about bindings, but at this stage we'll just stick with the 3 that are here. They're the 3 main ones you're going to see. There's one module ID which I don't believe is used anymore, and there's a couple of others that we can use, but at this stage we don't need to know them. So what I want to do now is I want to actually update the markup for this profile using Bootstrap, and we're going to use the Bootstrap card to show the profile details for a particular player. Alright, so let's go into players-profile.component.html, click on that. Now at the moment it says players profile works, but we don't want that. we're going to remove that, and we're going to put something a little bit more specific to what the component actually is. And so we're going to start off with a div. We're going to have a class on it. We're going to call it card, like so. And we'll close that. So this is a Bootstrap card. Inside of that, we're going to have a div with a class of card block. And we close that. And inside of the card block, we're going to have a H4 header, or heading. And we're going to name it at this stage. I'm just going to put the name LeBron James here. You'll see why in a short period why I'm doing that. So that's the heading part. And then underneath that particular block, we're going to include a UL tag. And a UL tag. You'll see how this looks in a minute. This is all straight from Bootstrap, the Bootstrap website, so I'm not doing anything major here. It's a li class we're going to call list group item. Is there anything else I need to do? On the UL, I need to specify a class here, and I'm going to call it list group, dash group. And then another one called list group flush. And you'll see how that looks in a moment. Inside of here, what I'm going to do is put a strong tag, and we're going to put in strong tag. We're going to put the word position. So this will represent the position of the player. So for now, I'm just going to hard code SF or small forward for LeBron, and then I'm just going to copy this 2 more times, like so. And we're going to change this to height, and this to weight. Whoops. And we're going to change this to 260, I believe, is what we've got for. No, hang on. 6 foot 8 inches, and I believe I put weight at 260, not 360. Jesus. So, and then the word pounds, LBS, like so. So I'm going to save that. Now at the moment, we've got this component, but we haven't actually placed it anywhere in our code. So now we're going to do that. And where I want to place it is I want to place it directly underneath the player or the player table here. So let's do that. So let's go to, well, first we'll grab the name of the selector. We'll go copy. And then we'll go down to, or up to player list. We're going to go into the markup here. And just before the router link, I'm going to add in that markup. So that's how you do it. It's like open and close tag with that name. Save that. And now we should get what looks like a little card under here when it actually recompiles. Now I need to put ngserve back on. But it won't look pretty, but there'll be like a card under here. It'll be probably the width of the screen. And we'll worry about styling at the end. So I might have to refresh this manually. And as you can see here now, I've got this card. It says LeBron James. It's got some data underneath in like little things, right? So that's that's what we're building. That's the component we want to build. However, we want this to change whenever we click on one of these rows. And you can see at the moment, we don't have that, right? But before I actually click on these rows, what I want to do is I want to actually bring this, I want to bring the text that's in here, I want to make it a little bit more dynamic, right? So how are we going to go about doing that? Well, this is a player, right? This is the player object, the same player object that's up here. So to start off with, I'm just going to create inside of the component, and this is what is referred to as a property of a component. So we can come up here and we can go selected player, right? And we can say is equal to, or no, we'll just say player like that. And we don't have that imported at the moment, so we're going to import player. Whoops, got to have that space. Import player from, and again you got to look at the directories of where we are. So we're in player profile. We're going to go up to, and then we go down to shared, and then I believe it's players, if I remember, and player. And that's that bit. And we're now going to make sure that we create a player. So in the constructor, I'm going to go this dot selected player is equal to a new player. So we have this player object. If you go down and look at the shared folder here, inside of players, we have player, and it has a constructor that takes in 5 things. That's the first name, last name, position, height, and width. So let's give it what it wants. Alright, so we're going to go LeBron James. He's a small forward. He's 6'8". Now to escape the double quotes, we do it like that with /, and then he's about 260 pounds. Right, so we're gonna put that at the end. So now we've got this dot selected player, right? So this is a property of the component, and so anytime you define a property on a component, this property, as long as it's not set to private, so if I make it private here, we can't access it from the component's HTML. However, this property is exposed to the HTML. So if we go back to our markup, and this is where we'll learn how to bind for the first time. Well, you might have seen it through the other videos, but this is when I'm going to first explain it. But basically what we're going to do now is the first binding, our first way to bind is going to be something called interpolation. And basically it's the double parentheses, which you may have seen before, right? So from this point, we've defined a component, a property called selected player. We know that we can see it inside this view. So in order to read data from it, we have to put it inside of double parentheses like this, or double curly braces. And then we go selected player dot first name, right? And then we can space, and we can do it again, like so. And we can go selected player dot last name. Now these first name and last names are just the properties on the actual class here. So you got first name and last name. So we're just exposing those out, right? So if I save this now, we should get the same name, LeBron James, right? Because we've hard-coded LeBron James in the component. So we've got it here, LeBron first name, LeBron James last name, right? So we go back and we look at our code, we refresh, and you can still see it says LeBron James, right? Now, the other thing I want to mention right now, and something I haven't been able to solve, is you'll start to see in the window here this whole bunch of warning about multiple modules with names that differ in casing. Now, I've gone right through my source code. I can't work out what the problem is. I know when it happens, but I don't know why it happens, and that's an issue I'm still dealing with. If anyone can work out what this means, I've done many Google searches and things aren't very clear as to how this is happening. But basically, it's not breaking the application, so for now I'm choosing to ignore it, and you probably can do the same. So if you like, or you can try and Google search it yourself and work out what it is. And if you happen to find out what it is, great, let me know. I'd love to know if I don't work it out in the near future. But for now, I'm not sure why this happens. It could be just a Webpack thing. Well, it is Webpack complaining, but I'm not sure why. So anyway, moving on from that, we've seen LeBron James is now being printed out here. And so we're gonna make sure that these all print out as well, instead of being hard coded like we have at the moment. So same deal. We're gonna come in here. We're gonna use the same double curly braces, and we're gonna go selected player dot position, because again position is a property, and then we've got height and weight. So then we'll just speed things up a little bit. I'm gonna copy and paste. Weights and height, like so. Save that, and now we're in a position where the data is coming in for real. Now, if you don't believe me that this is not real data and it still feels like it's static, we'll go change something. So if I come into the component now, and instead of having LeBron, I put Kobe or something, and save, and I come back, you'll see now it says Kobe James. Or if he's not 260 pounds and he's only 160 pounds, right? You see 160 pounds. So it is actually, in fact, actually updating, right? But this is not ideal. This is not what we want, right? We don't want to be able to, we don't want to hard code in here the selected player, right? We want to get that information from this table. Because at the end of the day, when we click on something, we want that data to show up in here. So how do we do that, right? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to define or expose an attribute that anyone that's using this component can pass through. So what I mean by that is that you see this selected player here. At the moment, it's only able to be read by this component. However, inside the player list component, we actually could get access to the selected player from this component, right? So once we click here, we can grab that row, set a selected player, and pass that through to this profile, right? And this is kind of what's called attribute binding. So firstly, what I'll do is I'll show you how to expose the attribute here. And the way you do that is you have to specify an input, right? So on this, we come in and we add a decorator and we go input, like that. And we need to also import this in. In fact, I'm going to get rid of this on init because we don't need it right now. So input, right? And we're going to remove the implements on init because again, we don't need it. And I'm going to remove that as well because we don't need it. And just clean this up a little bit. And now we also don't need the constructor. Right? So basically this class has now come down to one property, which we're going to say this is an input into this component and you have to pass in a player, right? So how do we pass in the selected player to this component, right? In the markup. Well, it's actually quite easy. So if you come up to the player list component, we do what's referred to as a attribute binding. So what you do is you start with square braces, and inside of the square braces you name the property of which is being exposed. So in our case it's selected player, right? So that's what we're exposing. Then we go equals, and then inside of these double quotes we have to specify a property that's on this component, this player list component, that can be passed through to this profile component. This may make more sense to you in about 5 minutes. Right now, I'm just going to type in here selected player. Right? Now, if I save this right now, it's going to crash. So if I go back to here, and in fact it doesn't crash, it just doesn't do anything. Right? So nothing is passed. So this particular list component does not have a selected player property, so it's passing through undefined. So as a result, this can't display any information because the object's undefined. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a selected player property on the list component. So we're just in the profile component. Now we're going to go to the list component and we're going to specify the same property. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this without the input. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go up to player list component, TS, and under list of players, I'm going to go select player equals player. And you might say, oh, okay, how do I set that to anything? Well, this is when you actually start binding to events in your DOM, right? So we know we want to get to this. We want to set this up. We need to provide a function that allows us to access this variable. So what we can do is we can create a function down here and we can call it set selected player, like so. And we're going to pass in a selected player, which is of type player, right? And then we're going to go this dot selected player is equal to selected player. And that's all well and good, right? But again, what's the point of this? You know, we still haven't bound it to the rows in the table. So how do we go about doing that now? How do we get the row that's bound, or each row that's bound to the table, to call this method so that we can set the selected player when we click on it? Well, this is another clever aspect of Angular 2. We come back to the player list component, and on Ngf, so this Ngf, which I will explain in another lesson, just after that, what we're going to do is we're going to add parentheses like so, and we're going to add click inside of here. And then finally, we're going to call that function. So, going back to... sorry guys. I live near a main road. I'm really sorry about that. So, basically, I'm in the wrong component here. I'm going to close that component actually. So, we're going to grab this method here. So the method that we just created, we're going to put into this double quotes here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually pass in player, right? Now the reason why we're passing in player here is because this let player of listed players, what it does is actually iterates over a list of players in a collection, right? So this is an array of players. This is an individual player, and it's actually the current player for the row. So when we click on a row with this player in it, we want to pass that player through to that function we just created. So then alternately, what happens is this becomes the selected player here, and that ultimately gets passed into the attribute here, which eventually gets passed down to the details section, right? I hope that makes sense. So let's give this a bit of a try. And just so you know, these curly braces here, this is basically an event. So when we're handling events, we put them inside of round parentheses. When we're handling attribute binding, we put them inside of square brackets. And as I will show you probably in the next video, it's not just related to attributes on components, but it's also related to attributes on DOM elements. Okay, but for now, what we've shown is basically, for the most part, an attribute on a component. You can see here, this is a DOM event, except it doesn't have the on in front of it, but it's still a DOM event, and basically they put in parentheses to say this is an event. So we're basically handling the click event, and we're calling this method when we click on something. Right? So let's see how this works. So going back over here, we're going to click refresh, and now I'm going to click on LeBron, and in fact nothing happened, and that doesn't seem right. That shouldn't have happened. So what have we done wrong here? Inline caused by cannot read first name of undefined. So for whatever reason, player is undefined. Interesting. So let me just go through this. So let player of list of players. We're passing in player. Set selected player. We're going into the player list component. Set selected player. We're passing in the selected player. It's been set to this dot selected player. And then down in player list component, we're pointing it to selected player attribute. And then selected player is the value. Inside of the component, the input is also called selected player. Very strange, guys. I'm just gonna quickly pause this video and find out what I've done wrong, and I'll get back to you. Okay, everyone, sorry about that. I found out what the problem was. The issue was because, and it was something I thought I didn't have to do ahead of time, but I did. So, inside of the player's profile component, the HTML file, I had to make sure that if the selected player, right, that was coming from this component, so see this here, this could be set to undefined when we first started up the application. So because it was being set to undefined, whenever it tried to call first name or last name or position or whatever, it was failing because this was undefined, right? So what you have to do in this situation is you got to add this Ngf directive, and then basically I just go if selected player, which means if selected player is something, it's not like null or undefined, then or zero or empty string or whatever it is, right? You know, a what do they call it? A falsie. You know, it's not. It doesn't equal a falsie, so it's a truthie. It will actually try and execute the code below, right? So that's all I needed to add for that to work. And then basically what that also takes care of is when I load the page, if I haven't selected anything, it doesn't actually show the component at the bottom, right? The component's missing, which is fairly good design. So now if I click on something, I've got LeBron James, I've got Kyrie Irving, I've got Kevin Love, Tristan Thompson, J.R. Smith. They're all coming through, right? And that's essentially where I wanted to get to in this lesson. Now, the only other thing I'll do right now, and just to clean this up and make it look a little bit more nice, is I'm going to just apply some styles to this. So, if you don't remember from the last video, for this component, I'm going to apply the styles to the actual player profile component.css, because this file is, oops, sorry, wrong one. Player profile component.css, right? Because this file is going to contain all the CSS needed to display that component correctly. So the first thing I'm going to do is, because we have this card, right, and I want basically on the card, I want to be able to reduce the width of it and center it so that it looks a little bit nicer. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to go dot card, and then I'm going to set a max width of, let's say, I'm going to say 30% of the screen. And we're going to set the margin to be centered. So again, that's 0 auto, if you remember from the previous video. And if I save that now, and I go over and have a look, you'll see that this should now, when I click on something, be more central. So it looks, you know, it's not great, but it does look a little bit better already. Now I'm going to change this to a black header like above here with the white text. So I'm going to do that now. And so we do that by going, so what I'm going to do is, in here, I'm going to add to this card block here, I'm going to add another class, and I'm going to add profile heading, which would be my own type of class. and then inside of here, we're going to go dot profile dash heading, right? And I'm going to set the background to that hash 232, I think it was, and the color to white, and save that once more. And I'm not sure what's happened here. Oh, there we go. And click. And there we go. We got a little bit nicer style there. Looks a little bit more presentable than it did last time. And that's pretty much it for this video. That's all I wanted to cover. I think in the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some navigation to this. And what that will do is it will demonstrate how you can bind to DOM attributes using that square brace thing, just to show you that it can be done. So because I want to get rid of these links, and I want to provide like a nav bar at the top here. So we'll have the main heading, and then we'll have a nav bar, and then some space, and then basically the section for each thing. And that should cover the basics of app components, and then we'll try and go into something a little bit more advanced after that, including explaining how these styles work under the hood. Okay, so thank you everybody for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.